The 1970s, an era of disco fever, economic meltdowns, and, let's face it, some of the most boneheaded cars ever to roll off an assembly line. If you thought the decade was all muscle cars and swagger, buckle up. Behind the chrome grins and polyester suits lurked vehicles so disastrous, they almost sent their own brands straight to the junkyard, ready to cringe at automotive decisions that nearly took down entire companies. Which brand do you think survived its biggest blunder by pure luck? Let's find out. 1971 AMC Gremlin. You want a masterclass in what were they thinking? Look no further than the AMC Gremlin. Imagine walking into a design meeting and someone literally hacks the back off an AMC Hornet, tapes it up and says, "Voila, America's answer to the Beetle." That's not a joke, that's actually what happened. In 1971, AMC desperately needed a hit to keep up with the wave of compact imports flooding in from Europe and Japan. Instead, they ended up with a car so visually jarring, it looked like it was caught mid-glitch. The Gremlin's weird, truncated shape drew stares, sometimes of horror, sometimes of pure confusion, and earned it a cult status as the car that always looked surprised. But let's talk about the real problem. AMC cut corners on everything. Under the hood, you got a wheezy inline-six engine barely powerful enough to outrun a shopping cart, unless you paid up for the off-balance V8, which turned the Gremlin into a tiny car with big handling issues. Inside, it was no frills all the way, cheap vinyl, a dashboard that felt like a plastic lunch tray, and back seats only a contortionist could love. Sure, you could get it in neon colors or with wild stripe packages, but you couldn't dress up the ride. It was jittery in the city, terrifying at highway speeds, and might develop leaks or electrical gremlins. Yes, really, before your second oil change. Yet, somehow, AMC managed to sell over 500,000 Gremlins, proof that rock-bottom prices make people do strange things. But the car's reliability nightmares, rust issues, and sheer oddness started eating away at AMC's already fragile reputation. By the late 70s, AMC was on life support, with the Gremlin symbolizing both their creativity and their corporate doom spiral. If you ever wondered how to design your own company's extinction event, just follow the Gremlin blueprint. 974 Ford Pinto. If you've ever doubted that one car can single-handedly poison a brand's reputation for decades, meet the Ford Pinto. At first, it sounded like a slam dunk. A stylish, affordable compact car for the American everyman, launched at the perfect moment as gas prices soared and imports took center stage. Ford promised efficiency and modernity, but delivered a rolling lawsuit instead. Why? The infamous gas tank. Positioned just inches from the rear bumper, it was so vulnerable that a minor fender bender could ignite a fireball worthy of a Hollywood stunt show. Now, plenty of 70s cars had safety blind spots, but the Pinto's story gets dark. Ford's own engineers begged for a 11 per car fix, a reinforced shield for the tank. But management, in an act of pure corporate cold-bloodedness, calculated that paying out for lawsuits would be cheaper than making every Pinto safer. When this decision leaked, the public was stunned. Suddenly, every punchline about American greed, every urban legend about cars that exploded if you looked at them wrong, landed squarely at Ford's doorstep. But the Pinto's disasters didn't stop at the back bumper. The engines, available in underwhelming 1.6L or 2.3L flavors, offered all the excitement of a lawnmower and the longevity of a wet paper bag. Acceleration was a joke, highway merges were a prayer, and the ride quality ranged from meh to call a chiropractor. Build quality, iffy at best. Interiors looked and felt cheap, rust was inevitable, and reliability ranked somewhere below buy a bus pass. Despite the uproar, Ford kept selling the Pinto by the hundreds of thousands, because Americans love a bargain even when it's a flaming one. But make no mistake, the Pinto scandal triggered a national conversation about auto safety, and Ford's public image still bears the scars. The lesson? Skimping on safety to save a buck is the fastest way to nearly torch your own brand, sometimes literally. If you ever need proof that desperate times spawn desperate cars, the Chevy Chevet is Exhibit A. When GM saw American buyers stampeding for thrifty imports, they panic-built the Chevet, a car so minimal it made a cardboard box look extravagant. Launched in 1976, it was GM's big "Me Too" moment, but what drivers got was an underpowered, uninspired economy hatchback that made people rethink whether walking might be the better option. Let's start with the design. The Chevet looked like someone had traced the outline of a refrigerator and added 4 wheels. Styling? There wasn't any. Inside, it was the kind of bare-bones experience that made you double-check you hadn't accidentally wandered into a cargo hold. The seats were stiff, the dashboard screamed cost-cutting, and plastic was everywhere. Cheap plastic, at that. Options? Hope you like rolling down your own windows and adjusting your own mirrors, because luxury wasn't invited to this party. Pop the hood, and you found a 1.4L or 1.6L inline-4 engine that delivered a whopping 53 to 60 horsepower. Yes, you heard that right, 60 horsepower, on a good day, with the wind at your back. Merging onto the highway required nerves of steel, as did passing trucks or climbing hills. Reviews at the time joked that 0 to 60 was just a rumor, not a reality. Handling? Let's just say mushy is being polite. But here's where the Chevet really earned its infamy. Reliability, or the lack thereof. Rust attacked the car like a pack of wolves, especially in wet climates. Owners swapped stories of floors rusting through, doors jamming, and transmissions that seemed allergic to working. Mechanical issues were legendary, stalling, misfiring, and shaking so badly at speed, you'd think the car was trying to rattle itself apart. Yet somehow, GM sold millions of these little heartbreakers, mostly to folks seduced by the rock-bottom price. The Chevet kept GM afloat, but at the cost of its reputation for quality. In the long run, GM paid dearly. The Chevet may have been cheap, but it showed that sometimes, cheap isn't just an adjective, it's a warning label. 1973. Chevrolet Vega. The Chevy Vega was hyped as Detroit's answer to the world-beating Volkswagen Beetle and Toyota Corolla, a sleek, lightweight compact with innovation to spare. On paper, it should have been a home run. Instead, the Vega became one of the most notorious automotive misfires of the decade, dragging Chevrolet's name through the mud and giving import skeptics all the ammo they needed. At first glance, the Vega was sharp. It had clean lines, a low stance, and the kind of future-forward look that suggested GM actually had a plan. Underneath, though, it was a ticking time bomb. The innovative aluminum engine block, which was supposed to save weight and improve efficiency, turned out to be spectacularly fragile. The engine warped under heat, guzzled oil, and blew head gaskets like clockwork. Owners found themselves stranded, their Vegas belching smoke and spewing coolant, sometimes before the odometer even hit 5 digits. Rust was the other great enemy. Chevy's cost-cutting meant the Vega skipped real rust-proofing. If you lived anywhere with rain, snow, or humidity, your Vega started dissolving almost immediately. Whole fenders would rot out in a single winter, and horror stories about seeing the road through the floor became punchlines. It didn't help that Vega was plagued by recalls. By 1972, 85% of all Vegas built had been recalled for one thing or another. The parade of failures did lasting damage to Chevrolet's reputation for reliability. It was so bad that some dealers started refusing trade-ins on Vegas because they didn't want to be stuck with the car nobody wanted. Sure, the Vega looked modern, and for a minute people wanted to believe in it, but under the shine lurked problems too big to ignore. Chevy's gamble on innovation on the cheap ended up as a cautionary tale, not a comeback story, and Vega's legacy, proof that one bad car can haunt a brand for years. 1970 Triumph Stag. On the surface, the Triumph Stag had everything going for it. A drop-dead, gorgeous body, the pedigree of a British sports car, and a V8 growl that promised open-air thrills. But under that Italian-designed sheet metal, disaster was brewing. The Stag became an icon of what could have been, thanks to a litany of mechanical nightmares that nearly bankrupted its maker. The Stag's biggest flaw was its engine, a 3.0L V8 that was ambitious, unique, and, unfortunately, utterly unreliable. Triumph's engineers placed the water pump up high, which meant that if the coolant was even a little bit low, the engine would overheat, warping cylinder heads and blowing gaskets. The block was iron, the heads were aluminum, a marriage destined for corrosion unless owners used special coolant year-round. Most didn't, and the results were catastrophic. If that wasn't enough, the timing chain setup was pure nightmare fuel. The chains stretched and failed, sometimes before the car hit 25,000 miles. When the chain went, so did your pistons, valves, and dreams of driving. Throw in uneven expansion of cylinder head bolts, and the result was frequent, wallet-crushing engine rebuilds. The rest of the Stag didn't fare much better. Electrical gremlins haunted every switch and gauge. Rust attacked the body, as with so many 70s cars. Owners loved the way it looked and sounded, until it left them stranded on the side of the road. By the end, Triumph's reputation was in tatters, sales collapsed, and the Stag became a cautionary legend. For many, it's the textbook example of how engineering ambition, without execution, can take down even the most promising brands. 1975 Bricklin SV1. If you ever wanted to see what happens when wild optimism, slick marketing, and engineering naivety collide head-on, just look up the Bricklin SV1. Brainchild of Malcolm Bricklin, yes, the same guy who brought Subaru to the US. The SV1 was Canada's shot at sports car glory. The pitch was irresistible, a gull-wing-doored, fiberglass-bodied, V8-powered safety sports car. The reality? A lesson in how ambition can leave your brand buried under warranty claims. The SV1's signature feature, the electrically operated gull-wing doors, looked futuristic but behaved like a prank. They were heavy, slow, and so power-hungry that if your battery was even a little weak, you were trapped inside. Owners regularly climbed out windows after the door motors failed, sometimes stranded in parking lots or rainstorms, waiting for a jump start just to escape. Under the skin, the safety vehicle one was a patchwork of compromises. The body was made of acrylic bonded to fiberglass, a process so tricky that 60% of early panels had to be scrapped due to cracks or poor adhesion. Even as production improved, up to a quarter of all parts were still rejected for quality issues. The V8 engines from AMC and Ford sounded tough, but the SV1's weight, plus shoddy fit and finish, made it more sluggish than sprightly. Then there were the leaks. Rain snuck into the cabin as if the car were designed for swimming. Electrical gremlins haunted every system. The factory, set up in tiny St. John, New Brunswick, never reached full efficiency. All these headaches, plus the SV1's sky-high price tag, doomed the car almost instantly. Bricklin managed to build fewer than 3,000 SV1s before going bust, leaving Canadian taxpayers holding the bag and Bricklin's reputation in shambles. Today, the SV1 is a cult curiosity, quirky, rare, and memorable for all the wrong reasons. For car makers, it's the ultimate warning. Dreaming big is fine, but if you can't deliver, your game changer could end up changing your company's fortunes for the worse. Plymouth Voler. If you're looking for a car that practically invented the phrase rust bucket, say hello to the Plymouth Voler. Chrysler needed a hit in the late 70s, a fresh, fuel-efficient family car to steer the company back to glory. Instead, the Voler became a byword for rushed engineering, quality nightmares, and recalls galore. How bad was it? Let's just say you'd be lucky if your Voler still looked presentable by the time your first payment was due. The problems started almost immediately. Due to inadequate rust proofing, Volers in humid or snowy states started sprouting rust within months. Fenders, doors, even the floor could dissolve before your very eyes. Mechanics and owners traded horror stories about pulling handfuls of orange dust out of places that should have been solid steel. Recalls? The Voler collected them like trophies, over 20 in just the first couple of years, targeting brakes, suspension, and fuel systems. The front suspension could collapse, especially under heavy braking. Brake lines corroded, sometimes from battery acid leaks, and stalling at stoplights became a daily event for some unlucky drivers. Even with the famous 225 slant 6 under the hood, Volers were underwhelming, neither sporty nor reliable, just another letdown in an era already defined by letdowns. Despite all this, Chrysler's aggressive marketing and low prices moved nearly 300,000 Volers in 1977 alone. But the flood of complaints and constant trips to the shop shredded any goodwill buyers might have felt. For Chrysler, the Voler's flaws weren't just embarrassing, they directly contributed to the brand's financial nosedive by the decade's end. When your company's savior becomes a punchline, it's time for a hard look in the mirror. The Voler remains a cautionary tale of how not to launch your next big thing. 1975 Triumph TR7. British Leyland hyped the Triumph TR7 as the shape of things to come. But nobody warned buyers that the future might be unreliable, unfinished, and stuck in the shop more often than on the road. Debuting with a striking wedge-shaped design, the TR7 was supposed to revive the British sports car for a new generation. Instead, it left a trail of angry owners and a battered brand in its wake. Let's talk quality, or more accurately, the spectacular lack thereof. The TR7 was built at the infamous Speak factory near Liverpool, a place so plagued by labor strikes, absenteeism, and even acts of sabotage that quality control was more rumor than reality. Cars left the assembly line with electrical faults, leaky engines, dodgy switches, and interiors that fell apart at a glance. By the late 70s, British Leyland was fielding more warranty claims than fan mail. The 2.0L engine sounded sporty, but power was modest at best. Worse, overheating and oil leaks became part of the TR7 owner's initiation ritual. Enthusiasts bemoaned the lack of a convertible. The soft top finally appeared years later, too late for most fans. Owners found themselves hunting for scarce replacement parts and wincing at every new rattle or warning light. Surveys at the time reported that nearly half of all TR7s spent significant time off the road awaiting repairs. For a supposed sports car, that's a devastating statistic. British Leyland tried moving production and making fixes, but the damage to the TR7's reputation was already done. The car's legacy, a symbol of British automotive decline, a lesson that slick design means nothing if you can't build a car that actually works. 1978 Dodge Omni. If you think blandness can't hurt a car company, meet the Dodge Omni, a car so generic it practically faded into the wallpaper of 1970s suburbia. On paper, the Omni was Chrysler's big hope, their first ever front-wheel drive compact, inspired by the wildly successful VW Rabbit. The American public was hungry for something new, something efficient, something, well, not this. Let's start with the design. Boxy, anonymous, and so utterly devoid of personality that parking lots swallowed them whole. The Omni didn't offend, but it certainly didn't inspire. Under the hood, things were even less exciting. Powered by a 1.7L Volkswagen-sourced inline-4, the Omni managed a meek 75 horsepower. For a car with Omni, meaning all, in its name, it delivered very little of anything. But here's the real kicker. Quality. Early models suffered from catastrophic rust, with entire panels crumbling before owners had a chance to pay off their loans. Mechanical gremlins were legion, electrical glitches, carburetor headaches, and gearboxes that shifted like a kitchen blender on strike. Consumer Reports called out the Omni for poor durability, especially as issues mounted with the carburetor and the electrical system. It was a car for people who needed transportation, not for anyone who actually cared about the experience. The driving feel? Let's call it uninspired. The ride was rough, the acceleration sluggish, and a full load of passengers was enough to make the engine beg for mercy. The interior was Spartan at best, plastic everywhere, with a vibe that screamed, "Just get me through the day." In a decade already packed with disappointments, the Omni fit right in. The damage went beyond gripes and breakdowns. Chrysler's gamble on the Omni didn't just underwhelm, it reinforced every negative stereotype about Detroit's inability to build a world-class compact. While later versions would improve, the Omni's early failures left a sour taste in the mouths of thousands, and the brand's reputation paid the price for years. Proof positive that, in the car business, the middle of the road is often the most dangerous place to be. 1975 AMC Pacer. Think of the AMC Pacer as the ultimate swing for the fences. A car so bold, so bizarre, and so totally out there that it became both an icon and a cautionary tale in one rolling, fishbowl-shaped package. AMC poured its dwindling resources into the Pacer, banking on the idea that Americans wanted something futuristic, roomy, and unmistakably different. Well, they got different, all right. The Pacer's design is still famous, or infamous today, a bulbous, glass-heavy body that looked more like a space pod than a sedan. AMC called it the first wide, small car, a tagline that tried to put a positive spin on a shape so unconventional it left neighbors staring. The car was packed with glass, nearly 40% of the surface area, which meant you could work on your tan while stuck in traffic, but also roast like a Thanksgiving turkey in the summer. Underneath that wild exterior, things got complicated. AMC originally designed the Pacer to use a lightweight rotary engine, but those plans fell through at the last minute, so they crammed in traditional six-cylinder engines instead. The result? The car was heavy, sluggish, and a gas guzzler just as the country was panicking about fuel prices. Handling was wallowy, acceleration was lethargic, and reliability was wishful thinking. Then came the cost. Developing the Pacer almost bankrupted AMC. Money poured in, but the hoped-for sales never materialized. Mechanical issues, poor fuel economy, and a love-it-or-hate-it design scared off buyers. For AMC, the Pacer was supposed to be the future. Instead, it became the company's final gamble before collapse, a pop culture punchline that, in hindsight, might have been too far ahead of its time. Or just too weird for its own good. There you have it, 10 cars from the 1970s that didn't just miss the mark. They nearly drove their own brands off a cliff. From exploding Pintos to fishbowl Pacers, these rolling disasters changed automotive history, for better or worse. Did you survive one of these infamous rides? Got a horror story or a soft spot for a misunderstood misfit? Drop your tales in the comments below, smash that like button, subscribe for more wild car history, and let's keep the conversation burning rubber.